Well, man, what's up, guys? So, man, we are starting a new series tonight, and it's all about the church. And the definition that we are going with whenever we think about what is the church is what happens whenever a broken people encounter a loving God. And everything that happens after that, man, we're so excited to spend these next several weeks just diving into what God has to teach us about what is it that we are a part of as God's people. And so if you are from church and you've been in church your entire life, then this is going to be for you. And if you're not from the church and you've never really spent a lot of time going to church meeting, going to a church building, then this is for you. There's something for all of us as we dive in tonight. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 16. I invite you to grab a Bible and turn there. Matthew chapter 16. And to kind of set up where we're going, I want to give you three moments that were unique for me, three experiences that I had in church. The first one was the first time that I ever remember going to church. So my neighbor down the street, his mom invited me to go to church with them. I did not grow up going to church like many other people in the room didn't grow up going to church, and at least not very often. But my first memory was actually being invited by a friend down the street. And so we go, and she invites me. And I remember going to this room, and we sat in this circle. And man, to say it was unique was a little bit of an understatement for me. So there was grown women, which if this was you growing up, hey, no more power to you. But it was interesting for me. So grown women were actually skipping around the church, like in a circle. And I was like, I thought that's what kids do. Like, I'm just like, imagine if you just saw me say bye, and I was like, all right, see you guys later. Like, y'all would be like, man, what's going on? I feel like that's just what children do. And so I was like, and I saw people with ribbons, like that's a thing that some churches do. And they were like doing this around the room. And I was like, I just felt very awkward in the moment. And I was like, I feel like at any time, Michael Jackson is going to pop out and say, you want to go to Neverland with me? And so it was just a unique experience for me. And so for some people, that's how they view the church. They think it's just these weird group of people that do these weird things. Well, another moment that was in my life was the first time that I ever went to a church with my dad. So I've been to church only 2 times have I seen my dad in a church building. The first time was whenever we walked into this service, and at the service, to come to find out, they were doing baptisms. And my dad's girlfriend at the time said, hey, Travis, if you get baptized, I will give you $50, okay? And so they were doing baptism. It was televised. And so I got baptized. And I would say my baptism really didn't mean much, but $50 is $50, you know what I'm saying? And so I would say, it didn't mean much, but I got $50 with it. Actually, I went through that motion. He was like, okay, go down, hold my, and I go in the water, come back up, and I asked, hey, could I get that $50 in all ones? Because I wanted to feel like a baller. And like it had like the band around it. I went to Spencer's. Anybody remember what Spencer's is? Okay, so I went to Spencer's, and I actually bought a Cartman doll from South Park that same day. Needless to say, I just went through some motions, but it didn't have really an impact in my life. And that's church for a lot of people. They go through some motions throughout their life, but it actually doesn't impact how they live their life. And it doesn't have an impact on the things that they're chasing in their life. The last moment I'll share as we go into this topic of what is the church. I remember going to a preteen camp. So it was like a camp for 5th and 6th graders. My friend invited me to go with them. And so I go to this camp. And who here grew up going to church camp, D-Now or church camps, okay, in the room? Who here remembers usually about Thursday night, everyone's crying? So that some people even call it cry night. And so everyone's crying, right? And I'm going, I don't know, like I've never seen this guy cry. And like they're celebrating. They're like, Johnny came to know Jesus for the 3rd year in a row. Everyone celebrate, And like all these people are making all these decisions. And I'm going, man, I feel really left out. Again, hey, I'm in 5th grade. I'm very disconnected from all this stuff. And so I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to be emotional. What do I do? So I actually thought about the passing of my grandfather. And I was like, yeah, this is moving, And I started crying. I know it's sad, but it's what happened. Now, why do I say that? Well, because some of us, church has really been wrapped up in just a few emotional experiences that we have from time to time, and that's about it. So it's this group of people that drink the Kool-Aid somehow, somewhere. It's this group of people that maybe we go through some motions, but it doesn't really have an impact on our lives other than just going to a thing once a week for an hour. Or it's this thing where we want to feel something and that's about it. My question is, listen, you can feel powerful moments with God as you're worshiping. I just did over there. But is there something more? Is there something more that God has for us? As we are looking at answering this question, what is the church? I would say yes. And simply put, in the statement we're going to dive into more is the church. What is the church? It is the movement of God through the people of God. That's what the church is. And so we're going to unpack this together and dive into what that means. And we're going to be in Matthew chapter 16, starting in verse 13 together this evening. And this is the first time that the word church shows up in the New Testament. The first time Jesus says this word. Verse 13, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He said to them, but who do you say that I am? Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Powerful statement from Jesus about the identity and activity of God's people. But as we go into defining the church, before we define who the church is and what the church is, we've got to define who the Christ is. And this is what he does in this passage as he starts to unroll for them this powerful movement of God. He's going to start with, listen, first you have to get who I am right. And the first point this evening is when he asks, who do people say the Son of Man is? It's because to rightly define the church, you have got to first rightly define Christ. That's the first point this evening. Like historically, Jesus, just a factual statement, Jesus is the most popular and the most polarizing person who has ever lived. And there's, just like today, back then there were a lot of people saying a lot of different things about Jesus. Notice as they start to lay out all these things people are saying, they say maybe Elijah, maybe John the Baptist, maybe Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. It's interesting to me that none of them are actually right. And there's a lot of people saying a lot of things about Jesus. Many of them are wrong and missing the mark. And I think the same thing's happening today, but Jesus is just as polarizing and popular as ever. So who here watched the Super Bowl? Okay, so who here saw the jacket that Damar Hamlin was wearing? So there was definitely posts about that. There's going to be a picture of it. So Damar Hamlin, arguably one of the most popular people in America right now, because he's the guy that went into cardiac arrest on the football field, if y'all remember that in the football game just a few weeks back. But he was wearing this jacket, and there were a lot of posts and a lot of conversations about the jacket, but it's a cartoonish looking Jesus on a cross, okay? So that was there. Who here watched the He Gets Us commercials, the Jesus commercials? So there are multiple commercials about Jesus and the way that Jesus wanted us to live our lives. And it's this He Gets Us campaign. And there were two of them that played during the commercial of the Super Bowl. And there are up to 200 million people that watch the Super Bowl. That's significant, right? And so still today, Jesus is as popular and as polarizing as ever, and there's still a lot of views about him. A lot of views that are just a little off about him. There's a lot of ways that people view Jesus and have approached Jesus in their life. One of them is that we go to Jesus, it's kind of like this genie Jesus. That he's the genie, that I go to him and he exists to grant my wishes. The problem is that God exists to serve you instead of you existing to serve God. And a lot of people, this is how they view. They say, God, I want you to bless all of the worldly wishes that I have in my life. And that's our prayer life, and that's the desire of our heart. And I would say, man, that's just off from what God actually desires. For some people, they view God and Jesus as kind of like this Zeus character, waiting just in desiring to smite you down. at any moment with his lightning bolts. For some people, it's the drill sergeant Jesus. He wants you to follow the rules and stay in line, and when you don't, there's a problem. And that's how you grew up, in a very legalistic kind of view of God. And man, we could go on and on and on. There's the Hail Mary Jesus, not this Hail Mary, but this Hail Mary. And so the Hail Mary Jesus, meaning when everything gets really, really, really tough, and really only then, that's whenever I'm going to throw out my prayer to God. Just kind of throw it up, God. And sometimes that's when we see the blue and red lights flashing behind us in the rear view. We're like, God, if you just let me go, I'll never enter the blank again. And we kind of find ourselves in that moment, and there's so many ways that people say this, and Jesus is going to say, here's what everyone's saying. World religions, they're saying Jesus was a good man. They're saying Jesus was a lesser prophet. That's what the Muslims are going to say about Jesus. Jesus is one way among many. That's what the Hindus are going to say about Jesus. But what is actually true? And we've done a message on this in our apologetic series, but the Christian view of who Jesus is actually where we get the name, the way. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. In John 14:6, this is what we believe. But God doesn't just want to talk about what we believe as a church. God wants to move from we to you. And this is what he does with the disciples. He says, who does the Son of Man say that I am? And they list all these people, and he says, okay, well, that's what they're saying. But who do you say that I am? Very personal question. Who do you say that Jesus is? As he stops, and I just picture this moment as he's staring at his disciples, saying, what is it that we actually are? What is actually going on here? And I think that is such an important question. So this is Jesus having the DTR with the disciples. So some of us, we just got out of our dating relationship series. The DTR is that conversation that you have as you've been kind of in this, are we talking? Are we just hanging out? Are we just friends? Are we actually starting to date? And you have this DTR, define the relationship conversation. And this is what Jesus wants to do with them. And I've had the DTR. I remember having the DTR with my wife. Whenever we were hanging out, I remember holding her hands. We were at the pool, and as we were kind of swimming, first we were kind of like doing the doggy paddle thing, and then all of a sudden, like my hand stayed down and hers stayed down, and they kind of touched, and from there they kind of, locked, and it was a good moment, And I remember just being like, I think I could just swim one hand the rest of the day. I just don't want to let go. Never let go, Jack. And I was like, man, I just want to hold her hand. And later on that night, we were on the phone. And it's awkward to bring this conversation up, isn't it? It always feels so much pressure as on this conversation. But I was like, it was so funny. He was so funny at the pool, that guy, and that cannonball. That was great. And, we just laughed all the time. And we were both laughing like, and I was just like, so what are we? What are we, though? I just wanted to know. And she goes, I don't know. What do you think we are? And I was like, girl? No, I didn't say that. I said, well, I think that you're my girlfriend. And she goes, okay. And we've been together ever since. And so we had the DTR. We had it. And so this is Jesus, not in a romantic way, but with a who are you going to be following as the Lord of your life way. And he's saying, listen, what are we? Who is Jesus to you? There's actually, I truly believe that there's not a more important question that you could individually answer tonight than who is Jesus to you? As God is saying, who do you say that I am? Not your parents, not your friends that are with you. Who do you say that I am? As I prayed and I started thinking, I was like, God, how would I answer this question? I just started jotting down some things and have a spoken word of sorts to share. It says, "Who do you say that I am?" How would I answer this question? Jesus, you are the one that changed my life. Everything good in my life is because of you. You are the one who actually wiped my slate clean, making me white as snow. I am a witness of your forgiveness. You saw all my sin and shame, but still you said, "Father, forgive him." I am pure because of you. Because you chose the holes pierced through your hands, I no longer have a hole in my heart. When I thought that I was too far gone, you showed me that your love reaches too far for anyone to be too far. You made my burden light, and now you are the light of my life. Because of you, I am the family man that I am to my kids and my wife. You are the father to the fatherless. I know this because as I was fatherless, it's you who showed me what a good father is. You are my healer. I have struggled so deeply with having to be on medicine for my anxiety, but I know that I'm going to be okay if only you stay next to me. You are my strength to keep going. Because of you, even whenever I think I'm going to fall apart, you hold me together. Jesus, you are ultimate pleasure. Because of you, I get to point others to a life that's truly better. In short, you are the king. You're the king of my life. You're the king of my heart. You're the king that directs my path. You're the king that made me your own, and you're the king that gave me a new start. You are the king who changes everything. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. If someone asked you, who is Jesus to you? What would you say? Because the world is literally dying to know this God that changed your life. And he changed mine, and this is the message that the church is built on and the mission of all of us here. But who would you say Jesus is to you? So important, because as we look at this passage, it moves on, and here's the next point. When you have the right definition of Jesus, it defines you. When you have the right definition of Jesus, it defines you. Look at verse 16. It says, Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And 17 says, and Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar Jonah." The only place in the Bible that we see Simon and we find out who his dad is, which is significant. And then later on, he says, God's the one that revealed this to you. And then he says, and now I'm going to give you a new identity. You are Peter. God places a new identity on him. Why is it the Simon Bar Jonah thing is significant? What is he saying? He's saying, listen, Simon, I know you. I know everything about you. I know where you come from. I know your family history. I know it all. That's powerful for me and many of us in the room, because maybe you're like me and you go, man, I got some stuff in the background of my story. I was talking to a guy, actually, I was talking to Russell, the guy that just got baptized, and I was like, man, we were kind of connecting on kind of our backgrounds. Like, dude, it's crazy to think like the first time I ever smoked weed was actually elementary school. Like there was this kid that came up to me, and I thought that he was cool and popular, and he had marijuana, and I just thought he was so cool. You could say that I thought that he was dope. You get it because he had marijuana. Okay, making light of something heavy, just go with me. But man, I have so many stories like that in my past of things that I dove into, a very broken story. But what Jesus is saying, listen, God offers to take the brokenness in your story and to build something out of it. And to build something better. And this is why he's saying, I know all about you. I know everything about you. I will take the junk even in your life and I will build something from you. And I'll place an identity on you. So who here has seen all the Toy Stories? So who here has seen Toy Story 4 with Forky? So here's the Forky character. They're going to put it up. So Forky, there he is. So Forky in the movie, Bonnie is scared at school, and so she creates Forky out of pieces of trash, quite literally. And so, like everything in the movie, she writes Bonnie on the bottom of his feet and says, "Okay, you're now my toy," and it's like her comfort toy. And like everything else in the movie, he comes to life, right? And like he even introduces himself, like he's like my favorite character. He's like, "I'm trash," and the whole portion of the movie, 5, 6, 7 minutes, is Woody trying to convince him that he's no longer trash, but a toy. I mean, and if you've seen the movie, then you know, like, every time he's like excited about it. He's like, trash, trash. And he's trying to jump into all these trash cans to go back to what he used to be, right? And man, I watched that and I was like, man, that's funny and cute. But actually, I think that's what a lot of people do. They have this past in their life. They have this junk in their life. And then God comes in, starts to say, I want to do something different in your life. And we go, but I'm just going to go back to the junk that I was stuck in. I'm going to go back to the trash that I was stuck in because that's who I was. And God is saying, and what he was trying to tell her, what Woody was trying to tell him was because of the little girl and because of her placing her name on the bottom of his feet, that he's no longer trash because of whose identity is now on him. Will you accept the identity that God has placed on you? That's the question. Will you accept the identity that Jesus says who you are? Because that might be who you were. But because of God, that's no longer who you are. I have 3 kids and I've given them names. I've placed God-given identity on them. My first daughter, her name is Bridget. Her middle name is Faith. It's Strong Faith is her name. My middle daughter is Cassie Grace, and it means that one who speaks grace into other people's lives. So we have Strong Faith, we have one who speaks grace, and then our daughter Ivy, her name is Ivy Hope, and her name stands for God's faithful hope. I've placed God's identity on them, and I'm praying that they walk in that. And I'm not saying that is just true for them, it's true for you. Jesus is saying, listen, I have placed a God-given identity on you. My name, Travis, literally means at the crossroads. It means I could go either way. It's kind of true, man. But God's going, no, I've ransomed you, and I've created the path that you're going to take. Will you accept God's identity that he has placed on you? Because I get to meet with a lot of people that are struggling with a lot of things, and they'll be like, man, but I just feel unwanted. I feel unlovable. I feel unworthy. And they'll honestly say things like, I hate me. Why wouldn't God hate me if I can't even stand me? How is it that a God who is perfect can stand me? And listen, what I say to them and what I've shared many times is that it's like God has one of those old school price guns that you kind of just roll the label across and it says what something is worth. And Jesus has looked at you and deemed you worthy of dying on the cross for, not because you're awesome, but because he is. And he has said, listen, I died on the cross for you. That is now your value and your worth. And what we do is we take that out of his hands. We say, thank you for dying for me, Jesus, but I'm still not worth anything. I still don't think that I'm lovable. And what Jesus is trying to teach us is that, listen, you were bought at a price. And you no longer have the right to say what your value is because God has already determined it. And he said, I died for you, and I placed a new identity on you. Will you accept that, and will you live in that? It will change your identity. When you rightly define Jesus, it's going to define you. And this is what he does. He says, you are Peter. And I wonder if he struggled with accepting that identity. You know, there's been times in my life that I've been in deep struggle. And I just didn't know how I was going to go on. And it was like in these moments of these deep struggles that I've had in my life that God's going, will you just stop running and would you just let me love you? Like some of y'all have kept God at arm's distance for years. And God is saying, would you let me love you? When you let God love you, and you let that be the definer of your life, it changes you. And this is what God wants for you and for me. And this is what he says, I got a new identity. You are Peter. Which, to be honest, his name wasn't like you are like, something crazy. Like you are going to be an avenger, like he doesn't say any of that. Like Peter, y'all know what Peter means? It means little rock or pebble, which I think is hilarious. I think the name rocks personally. And so, yeah, you get it. But he says, you are this stone. And you might go, well, that doesn't mean much. Well, how can a stone make an impact, right? Well, it depends on who's holding it. Because whenever someone's holding a stone that's very, very powerful, namely God, he can make quite the ripple effect with your life. Who is it that preaches the first sermon ever when the church starts? Peter. 3,000 people come to know Jesus when Peter preaches the first message that we see in the book of Acts, the start of the church. Man, it's a little pebble, just a stone, but it's in the hands of a mighty God. And this is me and this is you. And then he says, you are Peter. He says, upon this rock, I am going to build my church. Now, there's a lot of debate over this verse. What or who is the rock? Some people are going, yeah, he's saying that Peter, I'm going to build the church on you. And there are some that say that Peter is the first pope in the line of many, many popes who represent the authority within the church. And I would say, well, he's the rock and he's the small stone. But does that mean that he's the foundation? I would say there's another view that was very, very popular. And here's the one I hold to. It's this. I think that the rock that Jesus is talking about, while he's going to use Peter as something that's a building block in the church of God, the statement that Peter makes is actually the foundation of the church of God. And it's this, that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. This is the message of the church even today. We show a world that is hopeless, the hope of the world, that it is Jesus that they need. And Jesus is the foundation of our lives together. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5 says it like this. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. 4 and 5. I'll back it up one verse. It says, as you come to him, Jesus, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God chosen and precious. So Jesus is the living stone or the cornerstone. He says, you yourselves, talking about us now, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Jesus is the foundation that we are built on, but he uses people. How cool is that? He uses people as his vessel. And he's building his church, and it'll change your life. So what is the church? It's a people defined by God. And next what we're going to see is that is a people blessed by God. That's what he says as he says this powerful statement. What he says to Peter, he says, blessed are you. Blessed are you. After he says, you are Christ, the Son of the living God. And he says, it's not you that came up with this. It's God who revealed this to you. And man, you're blessed because of it. How are we the blessed people of God? When I talk to people, I find myself often saying, as I talk about all the things I've seen God do just in our college ministry, I say it's crazy, man, because God has given me a front row seat to his work as he changes one life after another life after another life. And what an amazing thing it is to be able to watch God do what only God can do. To see God break chains off of people as he calls them from their sin into something more. To see God, man, and have a front row seat as he pulls people out of the pit of depression and he gives them the hope that they need to keep going. Man, to just watch God reveal who he is to people right in front of my own eyes, and to show how his love can set them free. Man, I get a front row seat to that. Here's what's crazy. What if, imagine being at a stadium, like a concert venue, and what if Jesus is standing in front of you saying, hey, you see this massive stadium all the way from the nosebleeds all the way up to the front row? What if Jesus is telling you and I, what if you can just pick your seat? That you can actually choose how close you want to be to the work of God. I believe this is what God is calling us from. He's saying, like, you can go to the nosebleeds if you want, but you can also come down and be on the front row. And I will show you what I do as I change one life after another. It's not just for pastors and ministers. It's for us, all of us, the church. And this is what God has for you and for me as he is building his church. Such a powerful, powerful thing, the church. What does that word even mean? That word is this word is the Greek word ekklesia. So, and I think it's going to be up. Yeah, there it is. So the ekklesia, it literally means the called out ones or the called out gathering. This is the literal definition of the church. It comes from two Greek words, ek, which means out of or from, and kaleo, which means to call. That God has called us out of something and from something, but to something. He has called us out of darkness and into light. He has called us out of our sin and into freedom. He has called us out of our past and our past sin, our past ways, and into the future that he has for us. He has called us out of wandering and into purpose. Man, God, I think, wants to call us tonight. Saying, I want to call something out in you. And I don't know what specific thing he wants to speak to you, but I know that all these things apply to every one of us. But I remember whenever I was in middle school, actually, there was this pastor that was going around the room, and he was saying things that he believed that he saw in people. And I'd been going to about a year and a half to this church, and I was in this preteen group, and he just looked at me and said, Travis, I see a boldness in you to share God's truth. And this is before I ever thought I was going to be up here sharing before you. But I can tell you that there's been a lot of times I felt anything but bold. And I felt so weak. And I've gone back to that statement again and again and again. Multiple times. I'm talking about something that happened in the 6th grade. There's something powerful whenever God speaks a word over your life. And this is what God is trying to do with us. This is the blessing of God. He's calling us out. He wants us to step into the blessing of his calling. Would we say yes to that and take the front row seat that he's offering us? He says, man, you're blessed. And whenever you step into that blessing, you start to become a part of the unstoppable movement of God in this world, which is the last point this evening, is the church is the unstoppable movement of God. This is what he said. Listen, I'm going to build my church. I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail. The gates of hell cannot overcome what God is doing. So really, really fascinating. As he's in Caesarea Philippi, right there in Caesarea, there was this place that was actually known as the gates of hell. And I have a picture of it. Show that first picture. So this would have been a drawing of it from back in the day. And if they believed that, so there was a cave there, and they believed that they would go there and they would worship what they believed to be the Almighty God, Pan. And they would do things to worship this god Pan, where they believed that it was a portal to the underworld, and that this is where the gods dwelled. And so they would go there and they would do things to worship, like have sex with temple prostitutes. They would sacrifice goats, and then they would also sacrifice sometimes children. And they did a lot of dark things at this place. And actually, there's a modern day picture of it. And so that's what it is today. So it's a place that they go, this is where it was, this massive cave. And Jesus is there, and he takes his disciples on a field trip, and he's standing here at the gates of what is known as the gates of hell. And he is saying to his disciples, hey guys, here's where all the wickedness and all the darkness of all the things that have happened in the past that you know about, I just want to make a statement for you. I'm going to start something called the church, and the gates of hell won't stop it. Because darkness will always flee whenever light breaks through. And Jesus is saying, listen, this is what you get to be a part of. Here's what's crazy. We are in the United States of America 2,000 something years later, and the church is still on the move. It's powerful. It's happening. He's saying, listen, how do we do this? Man, there's a lot of people that are trapped, man. A lot of people that are stuck in all kinds of brokenness. A lot of people that are wondering how they're going to get out of this hurt that they're in or this addiction that they're in. And Jesus is saying, listen, here's how we're going to do it. You have a message. It's called good news. You share the gospel to trapped people. Watch them be set free. You share the light of Jesus to people stuck in darkness and watch the light of the world grab hold of their life and change everything. You get to see that over and over and over again. Man, guys, I could have us in this room right now raise your hands if I wanted to say you have come to know Jesus here, and dozens of hands right here would come up because God is still changing lives. And he's saying, you get to be a part of the unstoppable move of God. There's so many times that we say, God, will you move? Jesus, will you move? Will you move? And I read this passage, and Jesus' response is, you are my move. You are the move that God is planning. The church, God moving through his people. He wants to do something through your life. The church is the movement of God through the people of God. And I love this picture. The church is God's offensive move towards the forces of hell in this world. And it says that the gates of hell, they're gonna become brittle and they're going to break. And maybe you're here tonight and God wants to lead you to break through. He's trying to break through to you. He is actually calling you by name. Tyler and I had a conversation with a guy just a couple weeks ago up here at the front, and he was saying, man, I've got this porn addiction. I want to get free. And I said, well, man, before we talk about that, have you ever surrendered your life to Jesus? And he said, no. And I said, well, man, what's kept you? And he said, well, honestly, my pride and feeling like I'm not good enough, both of them. And I said, man, before God frees you outwardly from this addiction, he wants to free you inwardly of sin in your life and give you a new heart. And he said yes to Jesus. And light broke through to him, and he is now learning what it is to follow Jesus one day at a time. But what I told him is that, listen, you see who you were, but Jesus sees who you can be. And the freedom of Jesus is real. He died to save you because he loves you. And he rose from the grave, making another way. Will you let his love redefine you? God wants to break through to somebody here tonight, and for the rest of us that have already been called out, and we've said yes to joining Jesus, having him change our life, would you simply make this your prayer as we go into a time of worship? Would you say, God, move through me. Move through me in my life. Let's pray. Jesus, we come to you saying, God, we need you. Would you move?